Hey everyone, welcome to Notion Office Hours. Let us know where you're coming in from. Let us know if you're a designer and let us know how long you've been using Notion. We've got a poll at the bottom here. It's always good to just kind of get a grasp on how long people have been using the tool. So yeah, if you can hear me, let me know where you're joining us from. I know this is usually, we usually do Friday mornings, Pacific time, but we're making an exception because Lennon is based out of Australia. So curious if we have other Aussies here. Cool. Let us know. I'll go cool. So yeah, I'm here. Lennon Chang is a fellow designer who's been using Notion for quite some time, and especially internally at his design studio today. So Lennon, thank you so much for coming today. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your own introduction into Notion, maybe how long you've been using it with your team and some of your favorite use cases.
Thank you for having me, Marie. I'm Lennon from Melbourne, Australia here. I can actually see hear myself in the
Is there a bit of an
in the
echo?
earphone. Yeah, it's playing a little bit.
Oh.
That's all good. Yeah, so I have been using Notion for maybe 1.5 years now. And I firstly got introduced of Notion actually by my studio. So it's already something that's being widely adopted at today. And I think people were mainly using Notion for like wiki purpose. There's quite a bit knowledge base already existing in our company that was very helpful on the first day when I onboarded to going through each of these documentation.
So they onboarded you with Notion?
Absolutely.
Very cool. So that was kind of your first intro. You're like, oh, what's this cool tool?
Yeah.
Very good. So how long has Today been using Notion?
I'm not quite sure, actually. I think maybe a year prior to when I joined. So maybe 2.5 years, a little bit.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, you've written some articles about it. You've done some behind the scenes, and your stuff is gorgeous. So
Thank you.
I know you said there's like 3 main use cases, ways that you have been using Notion pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to go into, and you can start screen sharing if you like. I'm sure lots of people will be pretty excited to see your space.
I will do that.
Awesome.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
I'll just zoom in. There we go. Looks good. Can you guys see that okay? Is the resolution and size okay? We'll proceed unless I hear otherwise.
Yeah.
Cool.
Silence is gold.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I guess before I dig in, I mainly use 2 different views in Notion. This view, I call it I use Notion for. It's a quick view. I tidy up all of the different use cases I've been kind of using Notion for, from design, product development, agile, to like some personal stuff at home. It's mainly a dashboard I show people when I do demo.
Cool.
Personally, I also use another dashboard. This is just for myself. I categorize it into live, work, and play. And they are very loose terms. And for me, work and play usually kind of come in together a little bit. I'll go back to I use Notion for. So what I want to mainly go through today are 3 different things. The first one is about the portfolio I built in Notion, which I did write a Medium article quite recently. The second one is how I use Notion to document my design, which I find really, really helpful. And that's kind of the starting point of me really exploring Notion's capability at work. And finally, I think Notion is great for doing web prototyping, which is something a lot of web designer, UI UX designer might be interested in.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's go into portfolio. So I typically have another buffer page for all of the pages I house. This one is for my portfolio. It's a simple 3-page structure, homepage, and there are 2 linked pages. I also do a little bit checklist for me to keep track of where have I put this short link around the social media I have. And then there are some previous versions. So this is my portfolio. And if you have never seen it, I'll do a quick scroll of it.
So pretty.
Thank you. I think a little bit backstory about why I did this, I guess. I was just randomly scrolling through a lot of designers' portfolio maybe 3 weeks ago at a night, and I was like, oh damn, they look really good. And especially I was kind of going through my director's website at work, and what's really interesting about his website is I think typically a designer's portfolio has a multi-page structure, and each page is kind of, apart from the homepage, more work samples or case study. What my director did was just dump all his work kind of organized really well and nicely onto the homepage. And I was like, oh, that's actually really nice. And I understand that most people probably wouldn't have time to go into each bits or case studies that typically show up online. So I was like, okay, that's a really good inspiration. Maybe I should try something like that. And with my previous couple version of my website, I've used CMS. I've also built a site from scratch. I know I always start doing maybe visual branding of myself and then look into the aesthetic things of the website instead of focusing on the content. So this time I was like, okay, let's strip out of all of that and just focusing on the content. So I was like, Notion is probably the perfect tool because it came with its aesthetics. It has an internal consistent design language for me to use. And so I can really focus on what the content should look like. What are the things I want to show people?
Yeah.
So I guess another challenge for me was I'm quite a generalist, which might not be applicable for everyone. I do a bunch of different things, and all of them have a different output. And for example, like designs, also illustration, photography, they are mainly visually based, but I just can't quite find a uniform template to carry them out, I guess. So on this page, primarily, I want to showcase those 4 different service offering of myself, I guess, that including myself as an interaction designer, my illustration capability. I also do a little bit of mobile photography, and I'm starting to doing a little bit consultation around Notion, which is something where you're really good at. I love your website of making it clear. I struggle so much just looking at what is the right wording of getting people interested in this part of the service. And I think you did a really good job on your website.
Thank you.
So I guess starting from the top, what I did is really, this is pretty typical for all of the modern design website that you have just one liner of explaining who you are. I want to make this line a little bit more usable to giving people ability to link to different sections onto the web page. I also had someone actually ask me how I did that. So literally on this page, apart from the first intro section and experience section, the rest 4 sections are kind of a module. Each one's kind of focusing on one service offering. And what I really did was just find the title. I locked this page. That's probably good practice.
Yeah.
And I'll just copy this link. And then you can actually instantly start creating anchor links into this. And I just pretty much paste it here. Where I also found out, actually, you can just highlight a bit of the text instead of the entire blog.
Yeah.
Which you can kind of do it here. And then so people with a little bit hint saying, click on each title to explore, you can now start to jump onto the different sections of the website. On the right-hand side, it's the typical social media where to find me. And I guess I had a couple of assumptions of making this website or this page that if people are not interested in from this part, people are probably thinking, okay, who are you? What is your experience? Which is kind of the next immediate section, just highlighting my experience. And apart from the normal working experience, also a little bit outside of work, like speakers or writing things. I also see design ops here in the comment section. Welcome. And then each of these sections, starting with a title, a statement of what I essentially do. For example, in interaction design, also deal with quite a broad things, which is really a struggle for me that I I wouldn't say I'm really deep into each of these sections, but I do have a broad range to offer. And what is a good way to really kind of present this is a hypothesis or a thing I want to test it with this side. A statement, a couple of work snapshots, which is the inspiration I drew from my design director, his website. And then a couple of links we'll go into later. And I think it's really important to start showing like my characteristic or examples of my work. For example, I'm currently kind of designing a national system for Australia to kind of monitor and predict bushfire, which is really exciting.
Amazing, yeah.
Which is a really big project being running for 2 months. And I probably need a full week to just write a case study for it. How can I surface some of the things that I've been doing just to give people a little bit taste? And if they're interested, they can definitely ask me to get more depth into it.
So I'm curious then, if you did decide you wanted to do more of a case study or go deeper in detail, would you do that as a video, or would you end up making a new page then that you would link to so someone could go deeper into that? Like, how would you approach that if you wanted to offer more detail about that?
I think depends, one, on the quantity of the case study. If I just writing one case study, I'll probably just append a link here. And I think this level of details is probably enough for the homepage. And I think photos and videos are a really great way to start showcasing your process instead of maybe just static images of interface design.
Yeah, and I think people probably want to see the way you think too. It's not just about that pretty end product, right? So just seeing the way that you contextualize and the sort of behind the scenes, I think, is always very appealing. Right?
Absolutely. And I actually track the analytics of this video here. I think it's probably 10% of the people visiting the site actually click on this video. So I think that's quite powerful message to keep reminding myself, show more process.
Yeah.
And Loom is a fantastic tool. I'm not sure if everyone have heard of it. It's really easy to use. You just do a screen grab, and then on the side, you might also have a little headshot of yourself if you want to see that.
It's pretty great, yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. And then the rest 3 sections, pretty similar. Illustration, people really like going to Dribble profile. Mobile photography, and then this Notion section. And also, I guess for Notion, one is, personally, I'm trying to figure out what is a good way to deliver the message of what I actually do around it. I think this statement probably still needs a little bit working, but on the right-hand side, I'm trying to build as much context as possible to people to showcase some of my use case. For example, building design workflow, create web prototypes.
I could see you doing a lot of consulting, probably with other designers too, right? Yeah, I imagine it's a big part of your audience. Yeah. And
they're all pretty interested in kind of how do you use Notion to boost like your design practice, which is quite unique, I think, from more general use of Notion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a smart niche market for you.
Right. And I think I just added these little, I think, UX boost links. Yeah. You can go back to the top anytime. That's at a glance the homepage, or what the homepage look like.
Awesome.
Shall we move forward?
Yeah, like, does anyone have any other questions about that? Otherwise, we'll move on. I'm curious too how many people knew that you can link to any block, and in fact, you can even link to blank blocks. So it doesn't even have to be a title. If there's like a blank block, you can link to that if you wanted to kind of like an anchor link take you to any part of the page. So I love that feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, very clean layout, very, very nice.
And I think this also kind of showcased that Notion supports multiple column. And then when I was building this, I was actually live testing on my mobile phone because Notion does support mobile by default. And the article I wrote on Medium was primarily actually focusing on the mobile experience of it.
Ah, very cool. Yeah, the Medium article is really great. And we have a link there at the bottom, the useful links that will kind of take you to some of these so you can go and explore them after in more detail.
Cool. I might just show this page. that I think it's taking that inspiration to its full realization. It's really kind of a glossary page for myself to showcasing, because I have so many different areas I kind of touch. Here's just a table of content of showing from A to Z, what do I do? For example, mood board or design system. And then just it's the same idea, using the table of content to jump onto the different sections. And then just give people idea of these things that I do. And
you know what?
Also, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say something I love about your space. So you can tell you're, user experience designer, because even just the little language things that you have around the toggle, like it's not just table of contents. It's you're actually instructing someone like, open this to view more. And I think a lot of people have trouble onboarding people into Notion because they don't use that sort of friendly language that kind of helps make it a lot easier. So I just really like how inviting and like simple and easy the space is to view. No databases, just very simple and beautiful.
Thank you. And I think this is actually the second iteration of it. The first iteration did have database incorporating. I got feedback saying people were freaking out.
It's so interesting. It's simple, but it's just a little too much for some folks, right? No, that's interesting.
And I'll probably showcase some of those database things in the work log part of it. But yeah, I think for people don't know that, I think this table of content functionality is really great, that you can just type in table of content, and then it will just spin up based on these titles. And I think that's great. And absolutely that using, I guess, more human languages, not only kind of in Notion, but generally in design is something we definitely strive for at my design studio. And that has made a really huge impact on me as well.
Yeah, I believe it. So elegant.
And I guess the final thing interesting about this page is it's easy to maintain for myself, that my work will just get evolved around time. And it's not uncommon that I will be working on 3 or 4 projects at the same time as an agency designer. I think every agency designer will experience that. It's also just giving snapshots of this thing, and maybe just have a little bit live link of the things you've actually shipped, or giving links to the article I've written about.
What's kind of neat about this too is it almost becomes like a living resume, because I think sometimes we forget, oh yeah, like this is all the stuff that I did over the past year. So over time, you can almost have like even if you're not sharing it publicly, it's sort of behind the scenes, you can kind of track all of the work and progress that you've made in your career.
Absolutely. And that's something we easily lose.
Yeah.
We churn out loads of static screens every single day. It's really hard to kind of trace back and tell the entire story. And I think by just giving a snapshot of different states of a project is powerful enough to help you retrace your memory of it.
I love that. Yeah. There was a question, and just make sure too, if you have a question, try to use the ask a question area below so it doesn't get lost. But I did notice Steph said, interested to know how Lennon fits keeping his folio up to date into his weekly or monthly process. So do you have like a standard process where, at the end of the week or the end of the month that you go back and do that?
I think that's probably perfect for me to drive into the next topic, which is
cool.
how I kind of do the design documentation. On that question, I think currently I'm reviewing this page maybe quarterly. But if I have a pretty big project, because not every project is big enough to be similar, like building a national system for rural fire services at Australia. So I will probably keep that there for a while. But when the next project hits, I'll probably start updating the homepage a little bit. Cool. So the second topic I want to talk about today is how I kind of use it as a starting point to do design documentation. And this ties in a little bit about my first experience about Notion. So when I joined this company, I actually moved from Brisbane to Melbourne maybe 2 years ago now. That's a long time. I had a great experience at my previous company, but what I ended up with was this maybe 40 plus projects. I have all these static images kind of staying in my hard drive. And And I just wasn't able to kind of trace back and tell a story again. I can look at, okay, I've done this, but I can't remember what I've actually done for the project. So by joining today, I start to asking myself, okay, I'm going to start doing design documentation. And then the first iteration of this was really simple. All I do is every day I take screenshots of my work and just maybe write a little bit around it, maybe take 2 minutes a day. And because I work on multiple projects every day, probably there might be a couple of different screenshots from different projects. This was an experiment run for maybe 3 months. And then I ended up with a full screen of things, and it's great to scroll through. It's like, wow, I've done so many things.
So you actually keep them all in the same document. It's not like you're doing separate documents per day. Oh, wow.
And I started to realize that this is great. It gave me like this fulfilling feeling that I've done a lot. But I think what it's not trying to do is, I still can't quite tell that story. I can't piece things together. I have to manually say, okay, I've done something maybe for this project. How can I quickly find other things I've done for this project? And then that's when I'm maybe 6 months in using Notion at my workplace. And then I've realized, oh, actually there are databases functionality of Notion. And that was kind of amazing for me to realize, because also I was trying to do programming as well. The database kind of knowledge just tapped into my mind. I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to go into details of that. So the second iteration of the work log was this giant database. This view might not be particularly useful. It is all the data at a glance, what it looked like. What I document was kind of a task-based database. Each of these rows is a task. I document which project I'm on, and with the tagging functionality of Notion, these are the projects that I've done within those 3 months. I was documenting it. Other things like what is the name of the task? How long did I spend? What is the date? I self-categorize my work into these 8 different categories. Some other random things that I want to track: skills, collaborators, links. I think what's great about Notion, just at a glance, is when you click onto each of these things, you still have this extra space to document whatever you've done. So it's kind of still capturing the functionality of the previous version, which I'm calling it kind of the Google Doc version. And this is really the version 2, the database. By just looking at, I guess, this table view, I can already get some preliminary data about myself, which is fairly interesting. Okay, so across these 3 months, I've done 26 projects, 235 tasks. How many different skills I actually get to apply, and how many people I've actually worked with. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, I love that.
And then I start to, because I've started tagging them using project, now I can start to spinning up maybe a view about a specific project. This
so
is
beautiful.
Yes. This is a project called Moonhack. It's about encouraging kids to code online. It was a campaign run by, I think, Telstra Australia last year. And then this view was kind of showing in a chronological order from the first day when I was doing some sketching with my colleague in the room till the last day. Kind of we are incorporating this feature image onto the Telstra website, the entire process. And then throughout the process, we might create a visual of this, or I'm actually creating some social media posts. And then it's fairly simple. It's still capturing screenshots every day after a task. But now I can kind of look at a visual journey of what have I done for this project. And that's really powerful.
So these are like a daily entry then for this project?
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah, I love that. Amazing way to show the visual story of the work.
And typically, this is also my way of teaching people what database functionality does Notion have. So this is the list view of Notion. This view is focusing on this learning tag. So any task I identify, I've actually learned something, I just put a learning tag on it. And I can quickly just spin up a view saying, okay, for this 3 months period, these are the things I've learned doing design. For example, it might be this Facebook ad post 20% text rule. I was quite surprised when I know that Facebook actually don't allow you to put more than 20% of text onto the ad. So it's a random fact. And other things, I think we were pretty kind of emphasizing on this hypothesis-driven design at Studio last year. And it was just like this simple thing that I remember in my mind. So I'm just capturing it here. And this view is quite interesting. Also, for me to kind of bring into my performance review, I can say, these are the things I've learned.
Oh, I mean, I can imagine your team members being able to see all that documentation in Notion. Like, it becomes very clear what your employees are doing.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I saw Fiona said, I wish Notion was around during my university time. Would have been so helpful to track my progress. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I wish something like Notion had been around.
I think a similar thing is that we're tagging project, well, I'm also tagging kind of a type of specific work. I think for designers that create different, like a variety of outputs, it's usually important to see how much you have evolved from project to project. This is something I've kind of learned at today, which is maybe unique to our studio, that it's called style tiles. Typically at our industry, we do mood board. Style tiles is a step forward of showing our clients or partners what does the user interface elements might look like in combination with these visual elements. And this view is pretty much showing for that 3 months, these are the different style tiles I've actually spin up. I had a colleague onboarding during this time actually, and his feedback was this was really useful because he doesn't really know what style tiles is. And it also kind of showcased what is the general style of this, or more like a personal or from a studio perspective, what is a general style of a specific output that we create.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like you mentioned, when you show a client, so how much of the work that gets done at today and within like all of these beautiful databases and pages actually get shared with the client? How much of that client collaboration do you do within Notion? How much do you show them?
Very good question. Unfortunately, I think Notion has currently been kept as an internal use only tool. And I don't think it's a bad use case at all. I think it's pretty great. It's usually the human matters more than the tools. And for our company, we recognize Notion is great at sharing knowledges, sharing internal materials. And I think these are all really great internal learning materials. And for client-facing, we do use Jira. And I have been using Notion, trying to go outside of that comfort zone a little bit. I'll show a quick example of, we do like Squarespace site, maybe once a blue moon. I did use once using Notion to kind of delivering a site guide, just giving people idea of how to use these components, what is the design intention behind the site we've designed, and to help them kind of build. And we simply just share this page, make it public access to the client. So I've been kind of pushing the edge a little bit, but I think the general consensus at my studio was let's just use Jira for all the client facing, because as an agency, we care about kind of on a task or estimation level, level related tasks for the clients to monitor.
Cool.
And I think finally, I just want to highlight that I still have the capability of kind of having the version 1 capability of just scrolling through everything that I've done from the time I start to kind of capturing these things.
Wow.
And it's like pretty giant of things to scroll through.
Super impressive. This makes me want to do better documentation, my own work.
Any questions before we move forward?
There were a couple that popped in. I think you might have answered it because Aaron asked a question. Have you thought about using a table of contents feature to make the page easier to navigate? But I think that was your V1 when you were doing everything in one page. And so I think the database kind of has now removed that need for the table of contents. And then the other question was, Sarah asked, in my experience, most agencies don't want you to share work in progress. Often you're not even allowed to show the final project on your website portfolio. How do you show progress if you're not allowed to share content from clients/agencies?
That's a fantastic question. And I think it's probably true for my previous company, and I'm lucky enough for our current company because we are working on more social impact projects. We do have a little bit of liberty around sharing some of these things. I think this question around intelligence property is fairly important. It should be reviewed case by case. What I recommend is always in your screenshots, maybe strip out of the client information, or every time you finish a project, try to review the design you've done, and then maybe come up with a more generalized rules or styles you've come up with and show those progress instead of focusing on, I've done this great thing for this specific client.
I think that's a great idea. And especially too, I don't know what the logistics are around this, but almost having like private links that you might share with an employer. So it's maybe not something that you share publicly, but maybe you've got like the generalized version and it's in a private link that you would, send someone your Notion link of your portfolio, but it's maybe not a public version of it.
Yeah, and I think common practice, a lot of designers put a password protection on their website. I think that's in the same vein.
Makes sense. Yeah, totally. Cool. I think that's it for, unless anyone else has any questions around that piece of it. I think we're good.
Cool.
Oh.
Awesome. We'll move to the last one, which is kind of creating web prototype. I think because I'm kind of a hybrid of development and design, I'm always thinking, how quick can I kind of make design into the development phase so we can start testing it instead of getting shoot down the idea and redesign everything. I think Notion is very powerful in supporting doing something like that. I'll give two examples. We've been working on this kind of project for a University X at Australia. And really what we were trying to do was to helping people to find a quick way to find all the graduate courses they might be able to do and understanding how are they eligible or not. It was a really quick test of kind of testing the homepage structure, and really we just spin up a Notion page, nothing really fancy about it. It's defining the title, giving all these instruction in details text, having links, and then having these toggles to test, if these information are desirable from the user. And I think Notion is fairly important, fairly powerful in kind of spin up multiple column. You can add images into it. You can just spin up pretty much website out of a page. And then really you can start testing the content part of the website to see how people receive the messages you are trying to design or deliver. I think second use case, speaking more to myself, we will test part of the design process. We were kind of testing the design of specific cards, and for this project context, the cards was to help people to identify the courses they actually want to select or they want to study. Sorry, I'm still hearing myself in the earphone. It's being a little bit
sorry.
It's okay. That's why I'm like, stop a little bit. Just
I know.
for that.
That was like me last week with, Dan Shipper.
Cool. So we literally just took this view into the testing. What I did for preparation was we asked for a CSV from the client and just saying, just give me 20 example courses, maybe the top top popular 20 courses, give me all these attributes. And then in the CSV format, I just import it into Notion. And I think the import functionality is pretty great of doing that. And instantly it become a table and ready for you to kind of turn it into a card view or gallery view. Mm-hmm. And what's so, I guess, powerful about this gallery view is that when I think about doing design nowadays, maybe 60% of my time is actually designing some sort of cards. It might be like for Airbnb, it's accommodation cards. For like a flight agency, it's like each itinerary, maybe a cards. There's so many cards that we are designing. And every time we are trying to define what is the information architecture around it, what is the IA of it. And I think Notion is great in testing something like that. So we literally just show this page to the students we were testing with. We're opening up the property, giving them, kind of give them a brief around, okay, this is a tool you can use to turn on the attributes that you actually care, and maybe reorder these attributes. And the task was, we limit the attributes number to 3, give me the top 3 things you care about, and order them kind of just live in front of us. And then for each of the students, we kind of just do a screenshot of the final products, and then we took it into synthesize.
Oh, super interesting use case. Yeah, a bit of using Notion for customer research.
Yeah, and I think
I think a question just came in from Fiona about that too. Would most designers consider Notion for design research, surveys for data collection, etc.?
I think I do want to point it out on that question that Notion does come with its own aesthetics and a full polished design system. What we kind of run into problems throughout those testing was people are thinking, oh, this is actually the final product. There is a fine line between you are telling people this is a prototype, and you're telling people this is the final product that you can just use this feature. And I still haven't really found a resolution for that. But I think it's something we need to keep in mind when doing testing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, as Fiona was asking about the sort of data collection side, I know Notion doesn't necessarily have built-in forms or anything. So I'm curious if you've done that, like taking surveys, and then would you just kind of import that, CSV of that survey data, or kind of how have you been handling some of that data collection, pulling it into Notion?
I think for the data collection, for me, it's usually we actually have to maybe plan a database for a project we are designing or working on, and having some mock data around that and put that into Notion and spin up different views, trying to understand how can we best utilizing those data on my use case. I would still probably use Google Spreadsheet at the moment, still to kind of doing full analyzing of the data. I think one challenge with Notion is there's no native graph functionality. And then also import and export, while they're great, there are certain limitations. For example, when you have maybe 10,000 rows of a CSV, it's pretty nightmare to uploading into Notion. Or on the other side, when you have to cleanse data, what can you, what are the mechanisms that are in place to support that, which is pretty limited at the moment, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like I sometimes use Typeform if I need to collect data, and then I'll just kind of pull it into Notion. It'd be nice if they had a built-in form of sorts, but until then, we just have to work with other tools, right?
And I think this area at the top is really Notion's answer to how do you collect data in a format. And I've had so many talks around, can we hide some of them?
Oh, I know.
Can we reordering some of them?
Toggle
I'm sure they're working on it.
Yeah, I think it's a very hotly requested feature. Yeah. Very cool. Super neat. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that, or are other people already using Notion for prototyping in this way? I'm curious.
And I think referring back to my portfolio site itself is just a web prototype of showcasing web pages.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know someone mentioned in the sidebar, I've mentioned it before, fruitionsite.com is a free open source way of doing custom domains with Notion. So, I mean, you don't even need web hosting or anything. If you want to pay $4 a month and get a free, make yourself a free portfolio website under your own name. It's so easy to do.
And I'm so looking forward to when Notion publish the API. Actually, I think it's gonna open up an entire new market for people to explore and play.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't even know if they know what's gonna happen once that opens up. Lots of possibilities. Yeah. And so you guys aren't using it for any kind of task management. It seems like a lot more for like documentation, research, collecting, summarizing, all of the sort of like process-driven stuff that happens behind the scenes. I'm curious too, are there other interesting use cases that within the team that you're using Notion as well?
So I can't really go to my company's Notion, but this section is showing, I have been running this kind of, I'm calling my second version of the design documentation work log, and I've pushed kind of this 3 months experiment at my workplace as well. So it's essentially the same database, but with 50 people in it. Okay, yeah. And we kind of, like a collective work log where everyone's adding all their daily sort of, oh, that's brilliant. And at the end of the experiment, I would say that most people are kind of rejected to, I don't want to document every single task I've done. It's something probably unique to me that I'm interested in doing. But we start to collecting a database of projects, of clients, of technology we've used, of different outputs we create as a studio. And all these database starts to talking to each other, which allows us to kind of have a notice board. Every Monday, we as a studio, we review the entire list of projects that's currently going on in the studio, and that's utilizing kind of the board view of Notion. And it's the project database in the board view. And then we can start kind of spinning up profile for the project, profile for a single person. You can kind of track what are the active projects you are working on, what are the past projects you've been contributed to, what are the tools and technology you've been using across different projects, what does your calendar of tasks look like?
What are you learning, what skills? Yeah. Because I think the learning tracking that you're doing about your own stuff would be super interesting to see across the team too, right? Like different people are going to be kind of studying and learning different things. And I think it's so good to pay attention to what are the unique strengths of each of your team members so you can make sure everyone's kind of doing what they're best at, right?
And on that note, I think we just start rolling out a kind of career framework thanks to Kylie at work. She's really brilliant in kind of coming up with a plan of helping like friends at today looking at what is your 5 years goals and what is your like this year's goal. And we are entirely using Notion to roll out the entire plan. I've kind of helped craft a couple templates for people to just fill out a couple of things. Some of them are databases linked to a more global databases that everyone at a later stage can have visibility into. Some of them are private to everyone. So in that sense, it's kind of a more interactive or more engaging form collector. Very cool. We also use it for lunch order. That's awesome. Its ability to automatically capture people's name and time when you logged it. I think Claire is online probably. She's our studio manager. One problem we run into is people usually do late order. And then we use that automatically capture functionality to call out the cheat cats. Just say, like nope, you logged the time after 12 o'clock today, sorry. We can see, yeah. Lunch is everything stuff. So that's so funny. Tina asked a question. Lennon, you are absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Very impressive. You've highlighted the power of using Notion in your professional and personal life. You've touched on this lightly, but I'm wondering how you keep yourself disciplined in documenting your thoughts and work every day without it becoming a burdensome task. Cool. I might show this page then. So this is a new template I've been experimenting. I call it Hustle. It's everything I document outside of work. At this page, at the top, it's a calendar of all the side hustle I do. For example, after today's session, I'll probably log chat with Marie. Yeah. And then I have a project database kind of link with each of these things. And I tally up the hour I kind of use that. To answer that question, I think it's, I do things kind of on impulse a lot.
Yeah.
So instead of kind of pre-planning everything, I usually just add things into this database and kind of use this as a retrospective tool to help me reflect. I do social. Yeah, for example, this is a post I posted last week about things. Sometimes I also kind of do a little bit learning documentation around a specific task that I've done.
Love that. And I think you bring up a really good point too. I think there is definitely not one right way to set up your Notion space. And so, like you said, I think only building what you need when you need it, and realizing if there's friction around something, or, oh, I need a place for my quick notes, or I need a place for my projects, and just building what you need when you need it. And you can always change your mind. You can always move your data around. So I think it's great that you're just noticing, like, oh, I'm going to try this. I'm going to experiment with this. If it doesn't work, I stop using it. I archive it. I try something new.
Exactly. And I think for especially developer or developer-designer hybrid, what's really great about Notion was effectively Notion has just took out the barrier typically would require a backend developer, a front-end developer for you to access these data. Yeah. And now, as a front user, you can just access these things. So not only it's good for, I guess, web prototyping, for whoever wants to actually start up their own product, you can probably start using Notion to mock up your idea first.
So true. I find like so many of, like I have a lot of, strategy and web design clients, but now they are building their own resource libraries in Notion. And some of them are even selling those resource libraries, especially when, pandemic happened and people needed to kind of get their stuff online very quickly. I noticed a lot of people were monetizing their own templates and resources. So people were able to make mini courses and, just use Gumroad to sell a link to your Notion template. There's all sorts of creative ways I think you can use it.
Absolutely. And I think we probably need to acknowledge that because Notion is great at so many things, like you will realize at a point you are going to hit certain limits when you're going really niche into a thing. For example, I was kind of creating a to-do list for myself using Notion. And back at that time, the mobile experience hasn't really been improved. But I think I had this model of, actually, I might just show that.
Yeah.
So this to-do list was kind of based on this idea of I actually want to develop all these different skills on a yearly scale. How can I kind of document my tasks every day, but keep tracking of how much effort I've put into each of these different things? So I started to kind of using this one database, and I kind of categorize them into 3 different levels. Tasks I can do now, like midterm projects I'm working on, feed into all these large skills at the last. So we can see that for improving my design skill, there are 4 projects. I've actually done 3. And for this learn JavaScript basics, there are 1 project, there are 1 task, and I've done that 1 task. But I started hitting a roadblock of opening Notion and realizing it's actually pretty slow for me to do this. I really just want a app, open up, add a task, close it. But I think what Notion really helped me achieve was after kind of planning out this screen, I now know exactly what I'm looking for a product. And then I did move to another product, which is called Todoist. It might be as well with any other products, but I know specifically I need this tag functionality. I also need a really quick interface to open, and Notion helped me realize or reconcile that these are my needs. Instead of fitting myself for other products I'm shopping, I'm kind of coming from my own perspective and shop these different tools instead of let them define me, I guess.
That's like me. No, I kid. Did you know you can also embed your Todoist inside of Notion, by the way? So if anyone
is curious,
cool. I'd be curious to see if it works for you or not. I know it's a different experience just to be able to quickly add that on your phone. Yeah, that's really cool. A couple questions did pop in. Do you save articles and resources into organized databases? Maybe I missed this at the very beginning. So yeah, if you're like, inspiration or articles you're reading, do you have a way of storing those?
I did. So 2 examples. This is for the map project I was working on. This was a quick view of recognizing all of the competitor or the inspiration of using kind of a database, and also with these other links. I can just quickly spin up a page, and I can share this page with my colleagues later if they are working on a map-based products. I also have this thing called Bookmark. It's less organized, and I quite like keeping it less organized, I guess.
Yeah.
Every time I find a link, I just put into here. I have these tags of firstly define what or who they are. Are they a website, a freelancer, a designer, or it's a document, a PDF? And then I have this wild category tag section. It's just
free
everything.
For all. Yeah.
So really, I can just search for, I'm interested in design system. What are all the design systems that I've collected? I tried Web Clipper maybe a year ago, and the experience wasn't that great until maybe last week. I was having a chat with a professor from Boston, and then he showed me the Web Clipper. I think it's pretty good now. So I'm starting to experiment in probably adding that to this database. Cool. And I think what's great about it is I don't have to manually put in the title or the link or scrape an image of it. The Web Clipper can just help me doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another question that popped in. Oh, someone said, not really a question, but I'm curious about your 1-month experiment to kick off your brand.
It was, yeah. So I did this kind of report over the last weekend. What I did was for the past months, in association with kind of launching this portfolio, I was trying to experiment how much hype I can create around it by posting, maybe post to LinkedIn, which turned out to be really great. It's such a good platform of kind of promoting work-related things. Like even, yeah, I didn't realize how many traffic it might actually refer to my website. I use this page kind of at the top, writing out a summary of what I've experienced for this month. What are the results? What are the highlights? I think this is one of the highlights that we get to chat to each other.
Yeah.
And all because I think it was Stephanie on Twitter was just kindly referring me to your way, and it just happened.
I forgot about that. That was the connection. Like, I love the serendipity of the connections that can happen when you put yourself out there and you put your work out there.
And also realizing I now have like a bigger client or audience base in US instead of Australia, which was fascinating.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Is your company worried that you're going to get snatched up by someone else? You're going to get headhunted by another company?
I think I'm pretty happy at my company, working on all the projects at the moment. They should be worried though.
You're like, time to increase my salary.
And really I think cool. Just kind of tracking these different data. I do use Bitly in my portfolio that just sneaking these little links, because I will have audience kind of clicking using web browser. So it's not like they use native Notion app to open another link. So the experience will be just opening another tab into the web browser. Right. And I was kind of looking at, I've actually created a little bit source to my company as well. I've wrote a couple of Medium articles, which I've kind of put into that useful link at the bottom of the screen. And then on LinkedIn, on Twitter, I think it was my realization come in as it's okay just to do like bits and bobs about maybe your personal brand or building out things. And what's really great about this portfolio was I don't really have a unified visual identity yet, and that's okay. You don't need to rush into that part of every designer usually excited about, I want to look good. Notion helped me to kind of focus on the core offering. What are the capability or what are the outputs I've actually created for people to kind of browse before I put an overhaul, nice color palette to it.
It's like letting the work speak for itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the learning here is literally your work is like my work is my personal brand here.
Yeah. I love how just the time that you take to be so reflective of all of the projects that you're working on, you know, the things that you're doing, the learning that you're doing. Like you're obviously very intentional with everything that you're doing, and you can tell that in your space.
Thank you.
There's another question that popped in, unless you wanted to show something else.
I think you mentioned that what's the kind of project management side or task management side of things that we've been experimenting. I did this browser testing for a project that we are on. It's pretty crazy interlinked databases. I have all these findings, and then I have a checklist of what are the browsers for each of these pages that I've kind of, did I tick it off? Did I test it? And what is kind of the linked findings, which I'm using kind of a roll up here to show me, okay, for the contact us page, there are actually 3 different issues. And also, what is kind of the components related to that? Because so often when we do browser testing, it's recognizing the same components over and over again, just on different pages. You just have to fix it once. And turn it into this Kanban for the team to kind of move through and then just fix them.
And how does this either connect or doesn't with if you're doing a lot of your task management in Jira? How does that sort of translate? Did you have resistance for people being like, "Hey, put it in Jira"?
Yeah. There was a specific moment that I was like, "Oh, I've done all these things in Notion already. Can we just use this for this one project?" I think what's really great about Notion is people might not necessarily want to start with a Kanban because depends on what your thinking pattern is. I might be scrolling through different pages. I might be getting started by documenting things in a page. And then a database about page makes sense to start with. But in that context, spin up a board doesn't really help, does it? It's like probably a spreadsheet or a table format of documenting the pages and the findings is probably more useful. But then magical about Notion is you can then turn it into a different view to fit your new thinking patterns and link these things together. I think that's ultimately currently what Jira doesn't offer. Everything is an issue in Jira.
To me, I found that was the same with Asana, like everything is a task, but sometimes it's more about notes or information. It's not necessarily a task, right? So yeah, different tools have that different strength. And I think you bring up a really good point about there is an element of knowing like what context, what pattern is going to be most helpful, even when you're showing someone else that information, right? Because you might show something and someone gets overwhelmed, like, I don't really get it, but suddenly you show it in a table or something, and people are like, oh, I get it. Like, that's so much clearer. And so it's a bit of an art, I think, to know what is the best type of information and view style that's going to help get buy-in from other people.
Absolutely. And I think another 2 good example in the same way, one was doing sprint planning. At agency, you do estimation all the time. And usually there is a divide between people doing estimation and actually doing the task. And usually they kind of split a little bit. This was kind of an exercise we kind of run in the studio of just listing out all of the tasks and then just put name onto it, put hours onto it. And then it's the same database. And later we just turn that into a board. It's like 2 different thinking modes of I'm deeping kind of estimating, and then I'm doing project management, and using the same database, spinning up 2 different views is pretty helpful in that sense.
I love it. I love it so much. just again, how different 2 different views can be of the same data is pretty cool. I think one of my favorite use cases for that is I have my weekly agenda. And so I embed my daily journal inside my weekly agenda. And so I have a version of it that's planning. And so it's planning all of the items that I want to do that week. And then I can switch to review mode. And then it's kind of like a snapshot of what happened that week. So it's like one is thinking ahead, one is reflecting once you're done. And I just love that ability to switch it up when you need to.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like you can instantly start changing the status of this data cell you've previously defined.
Exactly. And one thing that I've really loved doing too is like tracking things on a daily basis, the same way you've been tracking your design, tracking things like flow, right? Like, was I in flow today? Was I feeling really creatively inspired? And trying to notice trends like, oh, at certain days of the week, I always manage to get into flow. What are those patterns? And so the more data you start tracking in Notion, you can make better decisions over time, I think.
Absolutely.
Another question came in from Harveen. Do you have kind of a calendar of all the going-ons, appointments, development work that you're doing? Do you have any way of organizing articles read, links of pages read, any way of organizing 100+ pages on Chrome or Safari to read and catalog?
I guess I'm pretty simple in that sense. I do have a couple of different things to manage. Notion for me is kind of like Notion for my company. It's my internal knowledge database, or it is kind of like the back of my brain of documenting things that's happened. I used to do this to kind of churn out the task I'm about to do, and in association with using Google Calendar, because everyone used that at work. So it's kind of different moving parts. And Notion is kind of where all the information ended up in. It's kind of this hub of connecting different bits together and to help me kind of review, reflect, and do some planning around the next bit. Yeah,
it's almost like, it sounds like the reflective nature and the activities that you do, they've become a habit for you. They're kind of a way that you approach the tool. I'm curious, do you have like whether it's a daily routine, it's like, oh, when I first come into Notion, I always open up this board, or I always do this or that, or at the end of the day, I'm always kind of in this page?
So I think the side panel probably just tells the story. These are the favorite pages that I typically use. I mainly probably use Hustle on a daily basis just to document my task. And all the other things are kind of from time to time. I also put my password in Notion, but just with initials, it's pretty dangerous, I know, but I just love it. But at the private section, I think really every time I had a new idea, I just create a new page. What I do later is probably I can just create a task today, and let's say chat with Marie. And then I open it up, and then I'll put this page just into here. And then it just disappeared from the private, but nicely integrated into this database. So everything kind of keep tracking this database with its context, and I can know what project it is, how many time I've actually spent on it. I'm gonna move that back.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just so easy to move information around. It's just always cool to see what how other people kind of move through their space. So how often do you go through? Was it your bookmarks, for example? Like, is that something that you would kind of review daily or weekly as you add more tags and kind of?
I think bookmark, I don't have a routine to kind of review it. It's really when I'm working on the next project, I'm like, okay, I see that maybe 3 weeks ago, I roughly remember it's related to this, and then I'll just search for the tag and look for it. It's really staying at the back.
Cool.
And Hustle is something I probably review on a daily basis just to look at, oh, I've actually done something this week. There's something today. That's a lot.
And that's outside of your 9 to 5 too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. I know we're like sort of at the top of the hour. Does anyone else have any questions or, things that you want to see, dig into? I'm already inspired. I'm already thinking like, oh, I need like a skills database, and then I want to connect it up to my goals database. Like, yes. I hadn't really thought about that. Like, I have my knowledge hub, but I haven't really thought about it in terms of what are the skills that I'm building toward that are going to help support those goals. And I really like that. Really cool.
And I saw your nursery template. I have a really simple one here, but it's really like just images, and I think it's just formula of how long it has been at our home.
I love that.
I think yours is pretty comprehensive. I'm really looking forward to see that.
No pressure, right? Yeah. No, I like that a lot. Yeah, I think there's really some great use of formulas too, like when I last watered it and things like that. That can be so useful, right? Sunny was saying there should be password protection for the journal template. I know, like adding a simple password protection would definitely be pretty handy. I'll have to poke the team about that. I know they've got their hands full, but that would be a pretty handy feature for sure. So cool. I'm very inspired by your space, and I already have so many ideas. So I know what I'm going to be doing this weekend.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so, definitely check out the links that Lennon shared below. His portfolio, the Medium articles. Like, there's just so much great stuff that I think is really inspiring. And I think even whether you're a designer or not, I think doing more documentation around what you're learning is always super valuable. What's a good resource for a Notion noob? Lynn, there's lots of great YouTube videos. If you're just looking for the functionality of Notion, we did do an office hours that was called Building from Scratch, and that's on Notion's YouTube channel for office hours. But Lennon, I don't know if you have any suggestions for other folks, designers or not. What would you say is kind of a good intro resource for Notion?
I think it's probably look at your podcast a little bit and then just have a play. It's I think
gotta play,
once you dig into the database a little bit and just play for yourself, I think that's probably good.
I agree. I'm definitely the kind of person that just I dive in, I click, I play with things, I imported some data, and don't worry about messing it up. Like, just make a sandbox for yourself. Check out the hit slash and start seeing what all of those different commands give you, those options. And just, don't be afraid to mess it up. The more that you use it, the more your space is going to become useful for you, right? Like you said before about, you make things on the fly because you realize you needed a space for that, and everything's a bit of an experiment. So I say it's going to get very messy before it gets organized. So you kind of have to be okay with a little bit of that discomfort while it's in progress.
And I think that's probably a really real depiction of everyone's Notion space, that there's always like space for you to improve. I read this tweet over the weekend. Someone's like, every time I stress out, I just go to my Notion space and tidy it up a little bit.
Oh, so true.
That made my day.
It's like, I'm just going to go work on my houseplants gallery right now. Yeah, that's cool. A couple other links in the sidebar that folks are sharing. Notionexpert.com, I saw that. As a total non-designer, I didn't know if there would be any applicable knowledge for me. How wrong I was. Lots of takeaways from my own personal wiki. Thank you, Lennon. Yes, I think it's just so important to see different workspaces, see the different ways that people in different industries are working too, and to see like our brains all work so differently. And so your Notion space is going to be a reflection of what you need to see. But I think the thing I really believe is your goals and the things that you want more of in your life need to be more visible. So if you want, to improve those habits, build those skills, do more design work, make that stuff really visible and really accessible in your space, in your dashboard, and it's going to be a lot easier, I think, to take action on that stuff.
Very good point.
Cool. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Lennon, thank you so much for being willing to share behind the scenes of your space and for sharing some of those useful links with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Marie.
Thank you. And we'll see you on the internet. Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.